Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 10, Episode number 12. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Our very special guest this week on the show is Chandhu Nair, SVP, Senior Vice President, Product and Technology, Data and AI, Lowe's Companies, Inc., and almost more importantly, a fellow NRF top retail voice. Chandhu leads the team supporting artificial intelligence-led data products, self-serve analytics. He joined Lowe's in 2020. Steve, it's so great to talk to a senior retail operator using AI and advanced technology to win customers, improve their shopping experience. I love this interview.
Well, yeah, I was going to say two things. One is it's always fun to talk to people that actually know a lot of stuff, right? And Chandhu definitely does and can talk about it in a way that I think is pretty digestible and understandable for a broader audience. And it's been a while since we've really gone deeper on home improvement. We have had a couple of conversations. Our conversation with a Home Depot executive was all about retail media networks, not so much this kind of topic. So interesting category, a lot going on, but he definitely goes into some really important and interesting stuff that they're up to.
Yeah, it's a fantastic conversation. We'll get to that right after the news. So we're both back. We're both back from ShopTalk. I just flew in, and boy, are my arms tired. There we go. A little bit of that classic humor for the listeners there.
And I'm
kidding.
Come for the classic humor. Stay for the deep retail insights.
Lots of buzz, lots of energy at the show. Tell the listeners what else you heard on other stages, or maybe in the halls, or in the coffee break rooms, or in the bar, or whatever wherever you were.
Wandering aimlessly around the casino. Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you hear at the craps table, Steve?
Yeah.
What'd you hear at the craps table?
So much. To a certain degree, a lot of the usual suspects, familiar topics. AI, retail media networks, unified commerce, personalization, these kinds of things. Probably the biggest difference, or at least the kind of amping up since last year and maybe even since the NRF big show, is a lot more about agentic AI. And then, of course, the backdrop just generally around what's going on in retail. What are the effects of all this uncertainty and chaos? Impact of tariffs, those kinds of things. I think the tone, certainly if we just go back to, say, ShopTalk Fall, where there was, I would say mostly, I'd be curious your perspective, but I would say there was quite a lot of optimism, even though before the election, we didn't really know how that was going to go. But I would say people were feeling like, business was pretty good. Momentum seems strong. And definitely the tone has changed a lot in the last 60 days or so. So, but most 100%. People are like, well, we're just trying to brace for a number of different outcomes, generally feeling like business looks to be much more challenging going forward than people might have thought, even going back to January.
Yeah. I mean, what I heard, or the vibe I picked up, so to speak, was another element to that, certainly the uncertainty, but a bit of confidence.
Certainly the uncertainty. Interesting. Interesting turn of phrase.
I like that. Certainly the uncertainty. Yeah. But a bit of confidence, in as much as many of the executives, many of us, went through the whole, of course, COVID era of retail, where I think we all came out more resilient, better able, more nimble. Listen, we've been through, our stores have been closed. Not going to get worse than that. So how do we? So I think there's a kind of optimism, so to speak. It's just the uncertainty around what comes next. But, that was kind of like COVID, if you think about it. Like there was a lot of uncertainty. If we think back 5 years ago.
Yes, I've heard that. And I was actually talking to another executive this morning. They were not at ShopTalk, but one of the things we were talking about was they've had practice with crisis management, basically. So
a lot of it.
Yeah. So from that perspective, yes, they've been through it, in the last 4 or 5 years. So they at least kind of have a sense of how to do it and realize that, we got through COVID, we'll get through, this, whatever this ends up really looking like.
Right on. Now you shared that you saw Richard Dixon from The Gap on the stage, and you found him an impressive character. Share your insights.
Yeah, I'd not seen, I know of Richard. So for people that don't know, Richard, first of all, has a tremendous resume. Most recently, really kind of takes credit for the resurgence of Mattel. And he's been at The Gap, 18 months or something. I can't remember exactly when he started. And so he's been leading the attempted turnaround, as I think we talked about just a couple of weeks ago when they reported earnings. they are definitely showing some signs of improvement. The conversation I actually had, kind of hallway conversation about several people who follow Gap, frankly, more closely than I do, was, well, very encouraging. They like Richard a lot. But, we've also seen sometimes where these turnarounds, they put, a few good looking quarters up because they're comparing to bad numbers. And then it kind of stalls out. So I think there's a number of us, myself included, who are like, well, maybe too soon to tell, but encouraging. So I'm still generally in that camp. But what I was going to say about Richard's presentation is, first of all, he's a super impressive guy, like very charismatic, very articulate, really able to paint a vision very effectively. And because he's really one of these guys that is about storytelling, you get the sense that this isn't about straightening up the aisles and, kind of tweaking the business model. It's really going back to, why do you want to be part of the Gap brand? I mean, you talked about Old Navy and Athleta and Banana as well, but, particularly the core Gap brand. And it was a great sounding story, not heavy on the details. But I've also heard, and he mentioned this a little bit, but I talked to some other people about it. He really gets into the stores, really listens to customers, listens to associates. Great. And apparently people have picked up, like on Reddit and whatnot, where store associates, store managers are talking about what's going on. A lot of positive comments. So, it's, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling perhaps a tad more optimistic about it, but there's still quite a bit of work to do. But I would say that he's a good salesperson. Let's put it that way.
Well, speaking of charismatic and articulate, we did some great interviews on site. We'll be rolling those out in the next couple of 3 weeks, and we also did a store tour, you and I. So we're continuing and building on our virtual store tours on our YouTube channel. Those will start rolling out. Actually, there'll be one up when people are listening to this. We're getting them in production. A lot of fun. We went out and looked at the stores. Some of that tour was less about the store itself, not a flagship, but about the story, about the brand. So it was great, just great to get out and walk retail. So it was a ton of fun, and hopefully everyone will find them as fun watching as it was doing them. So anyway, keep tuned to our YouTube channel for that. All right, let's get into the news, brought to you by Celonis, enabling process intelligence to make a business processes work across systems, departments, and organizations. Try it for free at celonis.com. That's CELONIS.com. So picking up on what you were picking up on, so to speak, at ShopTalk, was this conversation around the macro outlook. And of course, we've got some little proof points. We've got an April deadline coming up. We got a little bit of a sneak preview the week prior with a 25% tariff. So what are you hearing, and what are you seeing? And we saw some consumer numbers around confidence. Tell us what you're seeing.
Well, this episode, if people are listening to it the day it comes out, is the day that the Trump administration is supposed to announce their reciprocal tariffs. So we will see what that looks like. There have been kind of mixed stories. Some stories have said that, Trump is really kind of sticking to his guns, so to speak, with some of the stuff that's been telegraphed before. Other people are saying there's some softening that might go on. So we can't really comment on it because it hasn't happened yet. But if you're listening to this, you probably already know what's come out. But there are a few other pieces of information that are interesting. Last week, we got word that U.S. consumer confidence has dropped to a 12-year low. That is certainly not awesome. I will point out, though, that there's a little bit of, checkered past, but there isn't fantastic correlation between consumer confidence numbers and what actually transpires in the immediate future in retail. It's quite all over the map, but I would say the trend obviously is not particularly good. Also, at the end of last week, we got some inflation numbers for the U.S., and inflation ticked up a little bit, not dramatically, but of course, we were on this trend where it was heading down. So it's a bit of a reversal of trend. Listening to some of the commentary on it, there doesn't seem to be much from tariffs in that quite yet, because many of them haven't rolled out, or just because the tariffs have been announced doesn't mean they worked their way through pricing strategies. So I think we're just at the kind of the tip of the iceberg here in terms of what the effective tariffs will be on inflation. A piece of good news, though, is that consumer incomes continue to grow quite nicely. So at least we're not seeing, and the job market generally continues to be strong. And if anything, there is a labor shortage, at least in the U.S., and all the activity on the part of the Trump administration to not only get people out of the country, but border crossings and other things are way down. So, again, whether we like it or not, or whatever our philosophy is, immigration is very important, particularly to providing workers in certain sectors. So the availability of their workers, which was already fairly short supply before the recent step-up efforts of limiting people coming into the country, or almost like stopping people coming into the country, as well as chasing people out or taking people out. There's a lot of commentary that unemployment may, even with all the governmental cuts, may not go up very much more because of the labor supply issues, which is not all about immigration. It's also about retirements, aging population. There's a bunch of factors there. So anyway, so we'll see how that plays out. But the last thing I was going to say is related to kind of the macro stuff is I said a couple months ago that I think we're going to start hearing this term stagflation a lot more. And that is definitely the case. And for people who aren't familiar, stagflation is basically very little growth while at the same time inflation remains comparatively high. We were on a trajectory of continuing solid growth, at least in the United States, with inflation coming down. Now the fear is inflation will start to tick up. I mean, obviously with that one report, but more significantly when the tariffs really take place, and that there are a lot of factors that are slowing growth down considerably. And when we talk about earnings, I'll just mention a little bit more about that, but we could probably move off the macro portion of our program.
So I mentioned that we did some store tours in Vegas. There was one store not located in Las Vegas that really was the buzz of the ShopTalk conference. Yes. Our good friend Ken Pilot mentioned it. Lots of other people mentioned it. Talk about this new store in New York City that's creating such buzz.
Yeah, well, as people may have heard, Printemps, the large French department store, I think they've got about 20 stores in France, just opened it's hard to call it a department store from what I can tell, and I haven't been there yet, but I've seen a lot of the pictures and talked to a number of people about it. What's really a big boutique. I think it's about 60 or 70,000 square feet. So if folks remember Barney's, roughly the same size as Barney's flagship type stores. But they opened this down in the Wall Street area, essentially lower Manhattan. And by all accounts, it's a spectacular store and really getting rave reviews, lots of buzz, kind of a risky move, I would say, not only in this environment, but just given kind of what people are seeing in the luxury department store space. So I'm very eager to see it. I think by all accounts, it is hard to imagine how this store is going to make a lot of money. And I don't think anybody believes that it is likely to be a format that will be significantly expanded. So it somewhat reminds me, even though it's a way bigger store and much more impactful, of the Story concept, which some folks might remember, which was very buzzy. Yep, people had to make a pilgrimage to it at every NRF for a few years, but does not exist anymore. It was purchased by Macy's, trying to roll out the concept within their stores. So, sometimes things that work in a particular city and the industry really loves, I will, for the luxury fashion geeks, people will know Colette in Paris or 10 Corso Como in Milan, very buzzy stores, beautiful design. Lots of people in the industry loved it. But I believe, Colette's closed. I think 10 Corso Como may still operate, but, not necessarily a scalable concept. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. I believe you and I will be able to go see that in June, but I'm teasing a little bit of information on that.
Absolutely. And if you want to have a good look at it and a great article, our good friend from CNBC, Melissa Repko, has a great article with a store tour in advance of you getting yourself to New York and seeing it in person. All right, let's talk about, here in Canada, while we were away, so to speak, the Hudson's Bay going into liquidation. There's, as you can imagine, with 4 centuries of history, it's a pretty complex wind down and liquidation. Yeah. Lots of players, from pensions to real estate to prior pension, from Simpsons before it left Sears. I guess there's 6 stores that they have shielded or outside the liquidation, but they may come back in. Anyway, a long way of saying that's underway. I think we expected that to be happening. Let's go to the opposite end of the value story in retail. Dollar Tree sells Family Dollar. What a disastrous deal. My goodness, they paid a lot for that store, and they just thousands of stores they just sold off. Talk about the details and what your impression is.
Yeah, well, just quickly. So Dollar Tree, which is the second biggest behind Dollar General of these dollar stores, they bought Family Dollar, which is a big chain, generally speaking, even lower price position than Dollar Tree and Dollar General. They bought that company for $9 billion 10 years ago. They just announced a few days ago that they are selling it off for $1 billion. So you do not have to be a financial whiz to say that was not a particularly good return on investment. But it has been a challenging division really the entire time. I think part of the scenario or part of the narrative here was Family Dollar stores were in much worse shape than really Dollar Tree understood, needed a lot more maintenance, a lot of management issues, a lot of bad retail locations. So they have been, for the last few years, working to try to turn that thing around, closed like 900 stores or something, I think, just in the last year. But they have not been able to right the ship. So they are cutting their losses and moving on. But yes, that is about as big a train wreck of a deal as you can imagine. So this hopefully will position them to move ahead. But the dollar store segment, has really been running into some broader issues too. So it's not just that Family Dollar was a disaster, but everybody in the segment has been struggling with the economic pressures, overexpansion, those kinds of things.
Let's shift gears, get to earnings. I was noting some commentary from Cal McDonald from Lululemon about not so worried about tariffs, more worried about uncertainty, picking up on the themes that we heard at ShopTalk.
Right.
Talk about their earnings and the results and what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general what we're hearing from some of the players like Lululemon, those that are more premium priced with really strong brands, I think they generally feel that they can take their prices up a bit and it will not hurt their business so much. But, and again, kind of the story we've heard from almost everybody reporting for the final quarter of the year is that they had a pretty decent quarter, but they're worried about the future. And that was Lululemon's case. Pretty solid results, more or less in line with expectations, if not a bit ahead. But they talked about their headwinds and their worries about the future, and that sent the stock down. So, it is just about everybody. That's what they're saying. In a little bit different vein, just quickly, H&M has been in kind of the middle of a turnaround, unlike Gap, not getting as much traction as they would like. So their earnings and sales performance was pretty disappointing, as well as their guidance was on the weak side. So they definitely got more work to do there. I think the narrative that is starting to emerge with a lot of the fast fashion players is, in the face of, we talked about Forever One's liquidation. We got to see their massive store in Las Vegas, which is in the middle of shutting down, is, it's a very crowded space, hard to carve out a position. You got a lot more competition from the Sheins, Temus of the world. And where does H&M sit? Because you've kind of got Zara, at the little bit higher end. Then you've got, lots of players that are at the lower end. And, is H&M kind of stuck in this murky middle that it's making harder for them to really find their way. So a lot of things they're doing pretty well there, but I think there's just only so much pie to go around and a lot of people going after it. Last one I was just going to mention quickly in a very different vein is one of our disruptor friends, which was a little bit of a, maybe not quite a wobbly unicorn, but they had not gotten to profitability after many, many years. Chewy's, the pet supply company, and they really seem to be on a good trajectory. Just checking my notes here, they were, for the year, they had 6.4% sales growth year over year, which is pretty good, but particularly a really strong fourth quarter. Their sales were up almost 15%. Gross margin expanded, net margin expanded. So not amazingly profitable, but like if you would compare them to, say, Wayfair, kind of the same vintage kind of e-commerce only company or mostly e-commerce only company, I would say that they're putting up they have much better momentum, and they're also considerably more profitable. So that's a piece of good news to end with, I think.
That's it for the retail news of the week presented by Salonis. So now let's get to our great interview with Chandhu and Nair from Lowe's. Chandhu, welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining Steve and I on the mic. Where are we finding you this Friday afternoon?
I'm here in Mooresville, North Carolina, at our headquarters. It's finally, the weather seems to be turning. Nice and kind of sunny outside, I should say. Hopefully, weather's a big part of our business. Hopefully, the weather stays that way.
Fantastic. It's lawn maintenance and spring planting and all that great stuff. It is your Christmas, right?
It is our Christmas, 100 days of spring.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again for joining us on the mic. Very exciting. And a special thanks out to the folks at e-tail who helped bring us together. And let's jump right in. Tell us about who you are and what you do for a living. I know you and Steve share something in common. I think you both went to the same school at one point, but who are you and what do you do for a living, Chandhu?
Yes, I noticed that. Steve and I did go to the same school, and we should talk about it at some point, Steve. So, So I currently lead as a senior vice president of technology here at Lowe's, our data, AI, and innovation practice. But I've been a career technologist, been in the technology space for about 20 plus years. The last 10, 12 of that, very specific to AI. I've had a mix of corporate and startup gigs. I've had a few startups of my own, and also pretty active, I would say, in the startup ecosystem, working across different startups and startup investments, etc. But I if you ask me, I'm really I like to build things. I like to connect different pieces and bring new experiences to life. For our customers and our associates.
One of the things that I imagine, so we have this global audience, which is wonderful. We tend to be concentrated in North America, so lots of folks listening will be quite familiar with Lowe's. But for folks that may not be so familiar, may live in a different country, can you talk a little bit about what's special about Lowe's? Just kind of some of the key things that make the brand remarkable, how many stores you have, those kinds of things, just to kind of level set people.
Absolutely. So Lowe's is a leading home improvement retailer in the U.S. We started off as a small town hardware store in actually North Carolina about 100 years ago. And we've since expanded to be a Fortune 50 retailer with about 1,700 stores, a growing e-commerce business, and about 300,000 associates. Just going to my roots of being a startup founder and a founder mindset, I call it a 100-year-old company, a 100-year-old startup, if you will. Yeah, because we are always trying to reinvent ourselves and really be the most helpful brand in home improvement retailing for our customers.
So it's not probably terribly unique for most retailers today to talk about some degree of transformation, responding to digital disruption, those kinds of things. So I'm interested in general how you think about that and some of the things you're doing, but also in particular, the home improvement category has been pretty challenged the last few years. So maybe you could talk broadly about technology innovation, transformation, and maybe some of the specific things you're doing to try to get that profitable growth engine going again.
Absolutely. And I'll probably take us back to 2018 when Marvin Ellison, our CEO, joined the company and really started our transformation journey. And right from the onset, he put technology at the center of driving the transformation, being that underpinning that can drive growth. And to really kind of put things in context, I mean, 2018, we couldn't basically print any receipt in a store. We had systems that were failing. Some of our operating systems in the stores were 30 years old. So what I would think the last 6 years has been an amazing journey for the company in terms of being able to drive that technology transformation and the overall company transformation. I call it as really, reinventing the power grid and upgrading that power grid that is needed. That is actually enabling us to then leverage all the emerging technologies, whether that is AI or spatial computing and things that we're just launching and releasing right now. But the underpinnings of that all goes to that core technology transformation that happened over the last 6 years or so. And that comes from all parts of the business. If you look at all of the retail fundamentals, from driving the best customer experiences in store, online, through our fulfillment and supply chain, all of our back-end systems, that is really that modernizing the power grid, if you will.
Taking you back to something you said about the organization, it feels like as part of your entire category of home improvement, it wasn't as a category a big leader in technology, right? So you weren't exactly as much of a laggard as you were kind of the industry, or the sector of your industry was a laggard. And I feel like the whole industry and what you're describing, you've gone guardrail to guardrail or post to post. You're now leveraging data. You're talking about doing these things, and of course, you're talking about AI. We're going to talk about your new Milo application in a bit, but everybody's talking about it. Everybody's doing AI, or at least they're talking about it. What's different about how you're approaching it? How do you structure it within the organization? And maybe there's a framework that you could share that there's a lot. It's a big thing to tackle. How do you get at it?
I think whether that is AI or any technology transformation, I would say I think the first thing that we are trying to do differently, and it's basically should be pretty much table stakes, is this is really not about tech for tech or AI for AI, but it's really around what are the core customer problems that you're looking to solve. And when it comes to home improvement, you said it right. I think it's a pretty unique type of a retailing environment, because home improvement to me really needs two key things. One is the expertise that is needed to solve a problem that you're trying to solve for your home. Most of us live in some sort of a dwelling, a home, and living in a home, we all know that there is constant upkeeps that you have to do. And then there is also the new projects that you're trying to do, whether that is your new kitchen or a new bath, or anything that you see on a TV or a friend's house that you want to do in your home, or simply life events that happen. You have a kid and you're trying to kind of convert a bedroom, kids' room, etc. So all of that kind of provides kind of a unique challenge and an opportunity. Number one is the expertise that is needed. How do I fix a hole in the drywall? How do I fix a leaky faucet? That is that requires the expertise to say, hey, is that the washer, or is that actually the batteries that you need to change in the motion sensor of that leaky faucet? To really dreaming up that kitchen project, visualizing it, making it come to life. So it's all about that project, not just the product, right? So when it comes to how we approached AI, we started with the top customer and associate who are employees who in our stores face on a day-to-day basis, and how do we, especially we look at the expertise and the inspiration angle that is part of our core business, and how do we enable that through AI? That was number one. Two, it had to be business-led. The technology is probably about 30% of what we're trying to do. The rest of it is really the business transformation. There's a lot of talk about data and AI, but I think I do want to kind of emphasize on the fact that it really is not about just encoding data. It really is reimagining the processes that can be powered by this data, and then encoding that process and that data. And that is really the power of AI, and that requires a lot of change management in the organization to reimagine it. So that's what we're trying to do differently in everything that we do in technology, and especially AI.
I want to follow that thread for just a second. You've got two big macro segments at Lowe's, right? The consumer segment, which you described, and then you've got the contractor segment. Do you set your team in that way? Like the contractor needs are different from a technology and an AI versus consumers? I'm just trying to get to how you structure a team to get your arms around such a big challenge with two very distinct segments.
Absolutely. So Lowe's as a home improvement retailer, we are about 70% DIY homeowners and 30% pro, which is the contractors that you mentioned. So now the way we have structured is, we have tried to keep our technology stack agnostic to kind of how organizations are structured, but because we needed the fundamentals, to be set right. So if you think about the fundamental data layer or the information layer or the experience layer, they had to be consistent. But what we had to do was look for the core customer areas of focus. And since you mentioned, the contractors or the pro business, they are less about the expertise because they have, that I mentioned, because they have the expertise. For them, speed matters. For them, being able to buy, products in large quantities. Think about the amount of drywall that you would need if you're doing a large project. And then
in stock, right? In stock is crucial for them.
In stock is crucial, and then they are doing multiple projects, so the ability to have credit offerings, matters. So we tend to anchor in on the core areas that our customers' needs are and what they have highlighted to us, and then try to build out different technology products that can cater and support the business that is driving the growth of it.
All right. Well, let's continue down this advice line. You've just launched Milo, and I used it. I got to tell you, it was great. I have a problem where my pipes keep bursting in my garage, and I asked it to solve that problem, and it recommended a different type of connector and different type of pipe. So talk about, is that the genesis of that particular advice, and how do you make it so smart? I mean, it's not just a back and forth. Talk about Milo a bit.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback as well. That is exactly what we are trying to solve. I think for most folks, who face that problem. In fact, I was at a store yesterday and we had a customer come in and said, "Hey, I'm trying to kind of replace the filter, the oil filter in my lawnmower. I can't really figure it out. Like, what is the kind of air filter that you need?" And there you go. You use Milo and you pulled up the lawnmower model, and it basically recommended specifically, which would have taken you either, like in my case, I'm not a DIY person myself. I would call my brother, who's probably more hands-on, or go to a Lowe store and try to get help, or try to go through pages and pages of instruction manuals that you get with the lawnmower, which most people cannot find where they are.
Right.
So the whole idea was to make that much simpler. So this is where I think AI is unique, because this was a problem. This is a white space area we couldn't really solve looking at all kinds of unstructured data like this in one place before, which is kind of what we think generative AI can help solve here. And what we also felt was it cannot be just a set of instructions. It has to be a list of products that we can curate from our catalog. 100%. It can be most people also go to a YouTube and try to watch videos, and so we wanted to bring together that element, because we have a YouTube channel for Lowe's. We have millions of subscribers on it, so we want to bring all that video in there. So it's one place for you to get a quick set of instructions, get to the right product, actually see it come to life, and make commerce happen as well. Because we would love to obviously sell those products to you as well, and then hopefully you buy, and then and more importantly, start creating brand loyalty with us, and that is a big part of how we were approaching Milo. So we obviously partnered with OpenAI, but we trained these models with a lot of Lowe specific product catalog data, project expertise data, all of our years of helping customers, and the data that was available was used to help help bring this to life.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic specific application of AI, and I think with all the talk about AI, it's great to be able to really boil it down to something that I think people can understand and relate to. But if we were to step back a little bit, thinking more broadly about how you approach unearthing innovation opportunities, whether they're leveraging data or leveraging new technology, could you just describe a little bit more about, do you use customer journey mapping, or are there any kind of techniques that you use to really try to say, okay, here's an opportunity to either take a point of friction out of the shopping experience, or really create what I call it amplify the wow, but creating some sort of really important thing that really differentiates yourself from the competition and brings great customer value?
Absolutely. And I'll break it down to two parts, if that makes sense. So one is like, how do we look at the right areas and the right kind of technology-based solutions that can help? And then two is, how do we fit AI into this framework? Because there is also a dimension with AI that I'll speak to, that is a little nuanced. But broadly speaking, it's exactly what you said. We look into our two customer segments, map out their customer journeys, their core problems and needs. just like I mentioned about the Pro, the speed, the in stock and credit, etc. And then, as we go through our strategic planning process, we try to map out what can drive the best value for our customers and our business. And then that cascades down to where do we apply what type of technology. And when it came to, and that's like and we do that exercise on a consistent basis. The second part of what we do is, we every time we put a product out there, let's say we put a new point of sale system or a self checkout system in the store, we actually would have our product teams and our engineering teams be in the store, including me. I mean, me and all the officers. We immerse ourselves in the store experience, really try to see how this is actually playing out to the customers. We interview all of our store associates, get that feedback, because they are on the front lines, using this technology to help our customers day in, day out. And those are valuable inputs for us to kind of help drive our roadmaps. So it's a critical full feedback loop that we bring to the table with any technology that we roll out. With AI, it was new, and it provided two types of opportunities. One, better ways to do the same things that we were doing, meaning optimizations, and two, white space opportunities, like things we couldn't solve, like some of the Milo type of opportunities was not possible if you look back 6-7 years ago. But then we had a different problem that we had to work through, because everybody was excited about the technology, so there was a lot of use cases that everybody could apply. And one thing we said from the start was, it cannot be a death by 1,000 use cases. We had to anchor it on what drives the most value for our customers, and hence driving the most value for us, and then having a framework based on three things. One, like I said, what drives the most value. Two, the operational readiness and the change management. If you think about most of the AI transformation is change management, 70% change management, 30% tech. That had to be factored in. And then, kind of how do we also communicate and cascade this down across the organization, because we need to upskill and drive AI literacy in the organization to help drive that change management. So all those three factors came into how we looked into our AI strategy. That really is a layer on top of our core technology strategy.
Maybe one other question before I turn it back to Michael. Particularly since you've been in this field for a while, and we all go to different conferences. And, one of the things that I witness at conferences, but get into conversations with colleagues or with clients, is when you see these new technologies emerging, how do you know which ones are for real, or how much, to commit to something when it's in an early stage? Because if we listen to what was going on in the world of technology 2-3 years ago, it was all about metaverse, right? And then now you barely hear about it. Now it's all about AI, generative AI starting to become more agentic AI. Any advice to some of our listeners about how to sort through that and pick the right level of commitment or exploration or testing to some of these emerging technologies?
Absolutely. And one thing, our CEO, Marvin, and our CIO, Samanthani, said from the start is like, we had to be a tech-forward retailer and never want to fall behind on technology, especially given the story that I told about, having issues with just printing e-receipts and things that was outdated. So one of the things we started with in Lowe's is our Lowe's Innovation Labs, and that's a dedicated team based out of Seattle and Charlotte here. And what we focus on is on a 3 to 5 year out horizon. What are some of the emerging technologies that can disrupt our customer base, that can disrupt housing and home improvement? And we continuously experiment different things there and try to see what Lego blocks should we try to bring in. a good example last week is the launch of Apple Vision Pro, Lowe Style Studio in our Apple Vision Pro. And that took years of experimenting different types of devices that came in across spatial computing, augmented reality, virtual reality, etc. And then trying to say, how does that apply in our world? And the way we looked at it is, what's the biggest customer problem? So I spoke about the expertise problem before. The second problem about designing your kitchen is a much harder problem. And here is why. Because if you go to an apparel retailer and get a dress, the first thing you do is you put that on and look at yourself in a mirror and you try it on. But there is nothing like that for a kitchen that you are spending $20,000, $30,000. And as a brand, we want to make sure that what you had in your head is exactly what you're putting in your kitchen. Nobody wants, a kitchen that is half done because your house is not functional without the kitchen, right? So then we looked at what is the best way for us to have these immersive experiences as this technology evolves. And so it took us, several years of experimenting different pieces and what Lego blocks really apply and trying to bring that into different environments. And we launched it in 5 stores in Austin. To really kind of work with our kitchen designers and the customers can really design their kitchen, with the Lowe Style Studio. But that's really kind of our way of consistently looking for what is, coming around the horizon and trying to understand how do we experiment and partner with some of these companies that are doing these amazing work. And thankfully, we have great partnership with companies, across the board like OpenAI and Apple and NVIDIA, etc., that we consistently bring in to mainstream and put in our environment, which is our stores, which is our customers, which is on our Lowe's.com or app, and then try to continuously evolve these experiences, learn from them. And the big part is, and a lot of these will fail. It's important to fail responsibly. It's also understand, while it fails, there may be Lego blocks in there that are critical that you need to keep, and they may come back to life, later. And how do we have a good catalog of those Lego blocks as well? So that's one way we are always trying to stay ahead, because these disruptions are happening faster and faster, and we all, our plan is to stay ahead of that.
Chandhu, I loved your phrase "death by 1,000 use cases," and this idea of failing responsibly. My last question, then I'll pass the mic back to Steve, is many of our listeners just do not have the same resources that an organization like Lowe's would have to put against technology. I mean, they probably don't get a call back from Apple or NVIDIA or any of these folks. So what's your advice to them as a technologist? You've already put on a masterclass about how you think about technology, but put yourself in a place where you're talking to a mid-sized retailer. What's your best advice about not getting overwhelmed by technology and finding the right technology and implementing it in the right way to benefit their customers?
On the Lowe side, we obviously are continuously making investments in technology, and we're thankful for our Lowe's technology talent across across all our offices, who's continuously driving these. But my learning, and I think this may be where my learning as a startup founder, you have to start small and continuously iterate. I think you kind of have to be ambitious about and have the dream, but start small and continuously drive it. So really, from my perspective, it's not about the size of the team and the number of people, because eventually it is really about the few engineers, the few product managers who can really get something. In fact, almost all of our key product launches have happened through a very small Scrum team that has come together, working closely with the business, and being in the field with, whether that is in the stores or supply chain facilities, et cetera, and then really be able to put something out there and really iterate and learn from there. So to me, irrespective of the size of the company, having a founder mindset and a quick bias to action, whether that is if things fail, to be able to quickly adapt, that is a big part of that bias to action that is needed, and really having a small core team and then expanding from there. Because if obviously you find adoption, whether that is your internal business users adopting it or your customers adopting it, then you can scale and grow, because then the ROIC really comes in. But you don't have to start with a plan of having hundreds of people in thinking that far out, and a lot of people get lost in that, if you ask me. But being able to start small, be incremental, iterative, and being able to get it in front of our customers or our associates first and get feedback is super critical.
Well, many great ideas and words of wisdom. And I have to say, I have kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling about the home improvement industry, because I started my career in, actually, this is going way back. My first job in retail was during the summer, working at a small, long gone home improvement warehouse called Grossman's in New England. But when I was a grown up, I started my retail career at Sears and worked on appliances and tools and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a category that I've know a decent amount about and have followed for a long, long time. And it's great to see all the exciting things you guys are doing at Lowe. So thanks so much for taking the time to drop some wisdom with us. We certainly wish you great luck on getting traction on many of these new ideas. And folks should definitely go check out the Milo. It's very cool technology, and get into Lowe's stores and buy something, get that garden going, whatever it might be. You're helping the economy. But anyway, Chandhu, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at a conference or whatever, but we really appreciate you joining Michael and myself on the Remarkable Retail Podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. And as you said, it's springtime, so just let's do some home improvement projects, and look forward to connecting Michael, Steve at one of these events shortly. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Season 10 are available each and every Tuesday, so be sure and tell all your friends in the retail industry all about us. And make sure and visit our newly refreshed YouTube channel for exclusive video and our new virtual store tours. If you liked our episode, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
And I'm Steve Dennis, strategic advisor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 2 books, Leaders Leap, Transforming Your Company at the Speed of Disruption, and Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant and advisor, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.